G'day fellas, Jim Harnwell here from Fishing World magazine. This morning I'm up the Shoalhaven River with my good mate Steve Gill. Now Steve's a top tournament angler, and what we're going to be doing is using Steve's experience and skill to teach you guys how to fish snags better. Now as you know, snags are great spots for fish like bream, bass, EPs, flathead, and up north species like barra, mangrove jacks, threadfin salmon. So what we plan to do today is identify the sort of snags you need to fish, and then sort of go into the detail of how you actually fish them, what sort of lures you'd use, where you'd cast those lures, and how to make the most of the snag so you can get a better result with your fishing. So Glenn, we're just working this snag here.
Yeah.
How close would you reckon you'd have to get your lure in to sort of get a strike? I mean, does it have to be right in there, or can you sort of be on the edge? Or
Look, like for example, I would put one past the front of it, like that. A lot of the fish will, especially the smaller fish that might be on the snag, will sit out to the front and try and get, there's a heap of prawns around, they'll try and get them as they wash past in the current. Now, other than that, you don't get a bite on the front, you'd start to work your way down the snag. Just keep peppering it along until, my favourite is pretty much the base of the snag, if you can get to it. In this case, there's so much light timber over it, we're not going to get a chance at that. So, look, the fish are probably well and truly in under it there.
yeah.
But the idea is to try and lure one out, or if they're aggressive enough, they might just chase your lure out on the first cast.
And with the retrieve, should you try and crank it down so it gets right down deep, or do you sort of knock it through actually sort of work it through the branches?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's the best part. One of the best reasons is attacking these snags with a hard-bodied lure, because the bib, as they swim down like that, the bib will hit on the stick, and because these slightly float, if you feel it hit, you can just leave it sit there and it'll float up over it, and you can pull it down over the snag again.
And some of the snags we fished this morning, they're obviously pretty old snags, so they're covered in barnacles and that sort of growth.
Yep.
Do you like those ones because they've obviously got a lot of food and stuff on them?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, look, at the moment, these fish are mostly eating prawns, so it's just the structure they're hiding on, it's ambush. But yeah, there are times where you'll just see, bream in particular, love the little barnacles. That's one of their staple diets. I mean, at the moment, they'd be definitely keyed on the prawns, but other times of the year, they're definitely eating barnacles, oysters, little crabs that live in the barnacles and stuff like that. So yeah, definitely, Jim.
And what about with the tidal influence on a snag? I mean, obviously, when we've talked about like the tide's coming down, it's coming in now, so this is the central area. Are high tides are better, or coming in tide a better time to fish a snag, or does it matter?
Low tide's probably the best time to go looking around. If you're new on a system, you definitely want to go at low tide, because there'll be so many snags that you're not going to even know are there. And so low tide, you have a prospect, find out where they are. You might even mark them in your GPS. You can use the structure scan. Yeah, so definitely the low tide's the time to look around. Then as the tide moves up, you'll know that a certain part of that snag will become submerged, and the fish know that too. When they get up, they get right up there. Like, if you can see in here the back of this snag, by the time we get another 600 mil of water, that's going to be the prime spot of that snag. There's going to be fish sitting up there where there's actually air at the moment.
And we're obviously targeting like bream and bass and EPs at the moment. So, what your standard sort of 2 to 4 kilos spin gear is the go for that?
Yeah, look, I'm using a 7-foot rod at the moment. We've been doing a lot of edge fishing as well, but I've generally got a 6'6" or 6'10" that I would use around snags. It's a little bit shorter, a bit more accurate, especially on a boat like this that's low to the water. Yeah, and the 2 to 4 range. I mean, look, 1 to 3, so I'm using a 1 to 3. Anything like that's generally sufficient. You want a bit of pulling power on a snag, and I'm using a 4-pound leader, which Years ago I used to think that was a bit too light, but I don't fish over that now. Just use 4 pound and even 3 pound.
And what sort of braided mainline?
Braided mainline, I'm just using a 6 pound Yamatoyo there, so that's a really good casting line.
And just talking about casting distance, how far off should you be from a snag? I mean, do they spook if the boat gets too close?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when we're talking about the bass, they're a bit more, like as we've seen this morning, they're a bit more aggressive and not quite as wary as a lot of the brim would be. But even the black brim to yellowfin brim, they vary a lot. Like a lot of times fishing some of the lakes down south in Victoria, you'll see a log on the bottom and you'll think, oh, there's nothing on it. I've just thrown the lure over it 4 or 5 times. You drive the boat in there, there's 5 brim line on the log. You can use the structure scan. Yeah, you have to be persistent, and sometimes they just won't eat. That's just how it is. We don't eat all day, so neither do they. But yeah, so those fish you can get a lot closer to, whereas yellowfin tend to be a bit more wary, and you've got water clarity's got a lot to do with it as well. So see here the water's all stirred up. Our mate, the wakeboarder, and we'd be able to sit pretty close to the snags today and still have a good chance of getting a fish. Whereas, you know, if you're fishing down the mouth of the river on a 2 metre high tide, which we're going to have today, it'll be very, very clear on the top of the tide, and yeah, you'd have to sit a long way off. You'd be doing maximum distance for your cast. And another tip with that is probably to approach from down current, because the fish will be facing into the current, and if it's really clear, they'll hear and see you coming down current, whereas if you come up from behind them, they won't know as much, so you've got a bit more chance of getting a bite then too.